Picture this. You're standing in the middle of Times Square at midnight on New Year's Eve. The crowd is electric, pulsing with anticipation. Confetti hangs in the air like suspended possibility. The countdown begins. 10, 9, 8. But while everyone around you is screaming with excitement, your heart is hammering against your ribs. Your palms are sweating. Your mind is racing through 1,000 what-ifs. You're feeling everything everyone else is feeling, but somehow more. Intensely more. That's you, isn't it? Always feeling everything at maximum volume, while everyone else seems to have their emotional thermostat set to comfortable. This video found you because you're one of the people who can't just chill out when the world is spinning off its axis. You're someone who lies awake at 3 a.m., not because you're catastrophizing, but because you can feel the weight of existence pressing against your chest, like a friendly elephant that doesn't know its own strength. Your friends call you sensitive, like it's a diagnosis. Your family tells you to just relax, as if relaxation were a skill you somehow failed to learn in kindergarten. The internet keeps showing you ads for meditation apps and anxiety supplements, as if your heightened awareness of life's magnificent chaos is a bug that needs patching. But what if they've got it backwards? What if the problem isn't that you're feeling too much? What if the problem is that everyone else is feeling too little? Imagine you're the only person in a room who can hear the fire alarm. Everyone else is chatting about the weather, scrolling through their phones, completely oblivious to the piercing sound that's making your eardrums vibrate. You try to tell them about the alarm, but they look at you like you're hearing things. "What alarm?" they say. "I don't hear anything." That's what it's like, living with high sensitivity in a world that's gone deaf to the signals that actually matter. Alan Watts, who spent his life translating ancient wisdom for modern minds, understood this predicament better than almost anyone. He once said, "The only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance." But here's what Watts really knew. Before you can join the dance, you have to recognize that what you've been calling anxiety might actually be the music. That uncomfortable electric feeling in your chest, that hyper-awareness of everything that could go wrong, that exquisite sensitivity to the impermanence of everything you love. That's not anxiety. That's awakeness. Think about the last time you felt truly anxious. Was it when you were binge-watching Netflix for the 6th hour straight, mind pleasantly numb in the blue glow of distraction? Or was it when you were standing at the edge of something that mattered? A conversation that could change everything, a decision that would reveal who you really are, a moment when the universe seemed to lean in and whisper, "Pay attention. This is important." Your nervous system doesn't spike when you're sleepwalking through life. It lights up when you're awake to the significance of what's happening. While others are cushioned by routine and distraction, you're feeling the raw electricity of existence coursing through your veins. Picture this. You're standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon for the first time. The vastness opens up before you, layers of geological time, the slow sculpture of wind and water, the vertigo-inducing reminder of how small you are in the face of something immense and ancient. Your heart races, your breath catches, your mind struggles to process the scale of what you're witnessing. Is that anxiety or is that awe? Now imagine everyone else at the Overlook is busy taking selfies, checking their phones, complaining about the parking situation. They're seeing the same vista, but they're not feeling it. They're protected from the overwhelming beauty by layers of mental noise and social conditioning. But you feel it all. The majesty, the terror, the profound aliveness of standing at the edge of something infinite. Here's the secret that no one tells you in those glossy wellness articles. Your anxiety isn't a malfunction, it's a feature. It's evidence that you haven't numbed yourself to the frequency of life that most people spend their entire existence trying to avoid. You're not broken, defective, or in need of fixing. You're awake in a world of sleepwalkers. You're feeling the pulse of existence while others are checking their pulse to make sure they're still alive. And that awakeness, that exquisite, sometimes overwhelming sensitivity to being human in an uncertain universe, is about to become your greatest gift. Over the next 30 minutes, we're going to explore the most radical idea you'll hear today. What if the very thing you think is holding you back is actually the key to your liberation? Your anxiety spikes when you're paying attention. When you're tuned into the frequency of life that most people spend their entire existence trying to avoid, while others are sleepwalking through their days, cushioned by routine and distraction, you're feeling the full weight of existence, the beauty, the terror, the magnificent uncertainty of it all. The Buddha called this dukkha, often translated as suffering, but more accurately described as the fundamental unsatisfactoriness of trying to hold on to things that are constantly changing. You know that feeling when you're desperately grasping for control in a universe that operates by its own mysterious logic? That's not anxiety, that's awakening. The modern world has convinced us that peace means the absence of discomfort, that happiness means never feeling unsettled. But what if discomfort is simply life trying to get your attention? What if anxiety is your soul's way of saying, "Hey, wake up! Something important is happening here." Watts understood this better than almost anyone. He lived through his own dark nights of the soul, his own periods of crushing doubt and overwhelming sensation. But instead of medicating it away or thinking positive thoughts, he learned to dance with it. He discovered that anxiety and awakening are often the same experience, viewed from different angles. Here's the paradox we're going to explore together. The very thing you think is holding you back might be the key to your liberation. Now, I'm not here to romanticize suffering or tell you that panic attacks are secretly spiritual experiences. Mental health is real, and if you're struggling, please seek proper support. But I am here to suggest that somewhere in the tangle of your worried thoughts and racing heart lies something precious. A heightened sensitivity to life that, properly understood, becomes a superpower rather than a curse. Over the next few minutes, we're going to untangle this mystery together. We'll explore why your nervous system is actually functioning exactly as designed, how philosophy offers a radically different perspective on internal turbulence, and most importantly, how to transform that anxious energy into fuel for a more awakened, authentic life. But first, let me ask you something that might change everything. What if the problem isn't that you're feeling too much, but that everyone else is feeling too little? Imagine for a moment that you're not broken, defective, or in need of fixing. Imagine that your sensitivity to life's uncertainties is actually evidence of your aliveness, your refusal to sleepwalk through existence like so many others do. Imagine that your anxiety is your consciousness trying to break free from the cultural trance that tells us happiness means staying comfortable and safe. This isn't about positive thinking or pretending everything is fine when it's not. This is about recognizing that your internal weather patterns, even the storms, are part of a larger climate of awakening. You're not anxious because you're weak. You're anxious because you're paying attention to things that matter. And here's what we're going to discover together. When you stop trying to eliminate anxiety and start learning to dance with it, something magical happens. You don't just manage your discomfort, you transform it into wisdom. We're not going to fix you because you're not broken. We're not going to teach you to manage your anxiety because it's not something to be managed. We're going to do something far more radical and far more beautiful. We're going to help you recognize that your sensitivity to life's uncertainties is actually evidence of your refusal to sleepwalk through existence. We're going to explore how that nervous energy you've been carrying can become fuel for presence, creativity, and joy. And we're going to discover together how to transform what feels like a curse into what it's always been, a superpower. The question isn't how to stop being anxious. The question is, how do you use your awakeness, your exquisite sensitivity to life, as a doorway into the most authentic, creative, alive version of yourself? Buckle up, we're about to find out. Your brain is approximately 86 billion neurons firing in patterns so complex that the most sophisticated computers can barely simulate a fraction of its activity. And right now, as you're listening to this, that magnificent biological supercomputer is doing something remarkable. It's trying to predict the future. Every moment, your nervous system is scanning the environment, processing thousands of pieces of information, and asking one fundamental question: am I safe? It's looking for patterns, comparing current situations to past experiences, and running probability calculations that would make a Vegas odds maker weep with envy. This is where anxiety begins, not as pathology, but as evolution's greatest survival mechanism, gone hyperactive in a world it was never designed for. Think about your ancestors 50,000 years ago. That hypervigilant scanning served them well when a rustling bush might contain a predator. Their survival depended on erring on the side of caution, on assuming the worst-case scenario until proven otherwise. The anxious humans were the ones who lived long enough to pass on their genes. Congratulations, you're descended from champion warriors. But here's where it gets interesting. That same system that once saved us from actual tigers now activates when your boss sends a vaguely worded email, when you see your ex posting vacation photos, or when you're lying in bed at 2 a.m. wondering if you're wasting your life. Your brain doesn't distinguish between a real threat and an imaginary one. It responds to stories about the future with the same urgency it would respond to immediate physical danger. Alan Watts understood this beautifully. He once observed, "If you want to stay in a state of tranquility, don't get involved with the world. But if you want to find out what's actually happening, you can't avoid a certain amount of anxiety." Yes, you can't amount of anxiety if you want to find out what's actually happening. This is profound. Watts is suggesting that anxiety isn't the opposite of wisdom. It's often a sign that you're engaged with reality instead of hiding from it. You're anxious because you're awake to the uncertainty, the impermanence, and the raw aliveness of existence. Most people numb this awareness with endless distractions. Social media, shopping, busy work. Anything to avoid feeling the fundamental groundlessness of being human. But you feel it. And that feeling, as uncomfortable as it is actually a form of intelligence. Let's get practical for a moment. What happens in your body when anxiety strikes? Your sympathetic nervous system activates. Heart rate increases, breathing becomes shallow, muscles tense. Blood flow redirects from digestive organs to major muscle groups. Your pupils dilate. Your hearing becomes more acute. This is your body preparing for action, fight, or flight. But here's what's fascinating. These same physiological changes occur when you're excited, when you're falling in love, when you're about to go on stage to perform something you care deeply about. The sensations are nearly identical. The difference is the story you tell yourself about what those sensations mean. Now, let's talk about time, because this is where anxiety really lives. Watts had brilliant insights about our relationship with temporality. He pointed out that we spend most of our lives either regretting the past or fearing the future, rarely inhabiting the only moment where life actually occurs. The art of living, Watts said, is neither careless drifting on the one hand, nor fearful clinging to the past and future on the other. It consists in being sensitive to each moment, in regarding it as utterly new and unique. Your anxiety is almost always about time travel. You're either replaying past mistakes or rehearsing future disasters. Your mind creates elaborate scenarios, most of which will never happen, and your body responds as if they're happening right now. Here's a simple exercise you can try right now, wherever you are. Place one hand on your chest and one on your belly. Don't change your breathing, just notice it. Is it shallow or deep? Fast or slow? Is your chest doing most of the work, or your diaphragm? Now, Slowly breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, and exhale for 6 counts. Do this 3 times. Notice how your nervous system responds. This isn't magic, it's biology. When you consciously slow your breathing, you activate your parasympathetic nervous system, which signals to your brain that you're safe enough to relax. But here's what's really happening. You're practicing presence. For those few breaths, you're not in the past or future. You're here now, in your body, in this moment. And in this moment, this actual present moment, because anxiety requires time travel. This is what Watts meant when he talked about the eternal now. Not some mystical concept, but a simple recognition that life only happens in the present moment. The past is memory, the future is imagination, but the present, this is where your power lives. Let's dig deeper into the psychological landscape of anxiety. Modern psychology has identified something called the default mode network, a group of brain regions that activate when you're not focused on a specific task. It's your brain's screensaver, and unfortunately, it's often running disaster movies. When your mind wanders, it tends to wander toward problems, unfinished business, potential threats, social comparisons. This is why anxiety often peaks during quiet moments, when you're trying to fall asleep, taking a shower, or sitting in traffic. Your default mode is anxiety mode. But here's what's fascinating. Meditation and mindfulness practices literally rewire this network. Instead of defaulting to worry, you can train your brain to default to awareness, curiosity, even wonder. Watts often spoke about the ego as the root of much of our suffering. Not ego in the sense of vanity, but ego as the psychological construct that creates the illusion of separation between self and world, between observer and observed. Your anxious thoughts often center around protecting this ego self. What will people think of me? Am I good enough? Am I falling behind? Am I safe? These questions assume there's a solid, permanent self that needs defending. But what if that assumption is the source of the problem? Eastern philosophy suggests that the self you're so worried about protecting is actually a fluid process, not a fixed entity. You're not a thing having experiences. You're the experiencing itself, constantly flowing, constantly changing. Think about this. When you were 5 years old, you worried about different things than you do now. When you're 70, you'll worry about different things again. The contents of your anxiety change, but the basic pattern remains. There's a sense of a self that feels vulnerable and needs protecting. But what if there's nothing to protect? What if you're not a separate self in a hostile universe, but an expression of the universe experiencing itself subjectively? This might sound philosophical, but it has practical implications. When you begin to see yourself as part of a larger whole rather than an isolated individual, anxiety begins to transform into something else. Curiosity about your role in the cosmic play. Here's another way to think about it. Anxiety is often the result of taking yourself too seriously. Not your values, not your relationships, not your contributions to the world, but the mental construct of yourself that needs to maintain a certain image, achieve certain outcomes, avoid certain failures. Watts had a wonderful sense of humor about this human predicament. He understood that life is simultaneously profound and absurd, meaningful and meaningless, sacred and playful. When you can hold this paradox, anxiety begins to lighten. You start to see the cosmic joke in your worries, while still honoring what genuinely matters. Research in neuroscience supports what contemplatives have known for centuries. Your brain is remarkably plastic. The neural pathways that currently default to anxiety can be gradually rewired through conscious practice. This isn't about positive thinking or denying difficult realities. It's about training your attention to rest in present moment awareness rather than anxious projection. Studies on long-term meditators show decreased activity in the default mode network and increased activity in areas associated with attention and emotional regulation. Their brains literally become less prone to anxious rumination and more prone to present moment awareness. But here's what's crucial to understand. The goal isn't to eliminate anxiety entirely. The goal is to change your relationship with it. Instead of seeing anxiety as evidence that something's wrong, you begin to see it as information. Your nervous system is communicating something important. Maybe you need to slow down, pay attention to something you've been avoiding, or simply acknowledge the uncertainty of being human. Anxiety becomes a teacher rather than an enemy. And this brings us to the most important insight of this section. You are not your anxiety. You are the awareness that notices anxiety. You are the space in which anxious thoughts arise and pass away. You are the stillness that remains constant while emotional weather patterns come and go. This isn't a concept to believe. It's a reality to discover through direct experience. Before we move on, let me ask you something. What if your anxiety is actually evidence of your sanity? What if feeling unsettled in an uncertain world is the only reasonable response? What if your sensitivity to life's impermanence isn't a bug, but a feature, a sign that you haven't numbed yourself to reality? Hold that thought. We're about to explore how this sensitivity can become your greatest gift. If this perspective on anxiety is resonating with you, I'd be grateful if you'd hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It helps me reach other people who might need to hear this message. Now let's dive deeper into what it means to be truly awake in this moment. Close your eyes for a moment. Actually, if you're driving or walking, keep them open, but shift your attention inward. What do you notice right now? Not what you're thinking about, but what you're actually experiencing in this moment. Maybe you notice the temperature of the air on your skin, the quality of light filtering through your eyelids, the soundscape around you, perhaps the hum of electronics, distant traffic, your own breathing. Maybe you notice tension in your shoulders, the taste in your mouth, the feeling of your body making contact with whatever you're sitting or standing on. This is presence. Not a mystical state you need to achieve, but the simple recognition of what's already here, what's always been here, while your mind was busy elsewhere. Alan Watts spent much of his life pointing people toward this recognition. He had a gift for making the profound seem simple and the simple seem profound. The present moment, he said, is the only time over which we have dominion. Think about that. Not the past, that's fixed, crystallized into memory. Not the future, that exists only as possibility and projection. But this moment, right now, is where your agency lives. This is where life happens. This is where choices are made, where love is felt, where creativity emerges, where peace is found. Yet we spend so little time here. We're constantly leaning forward into the future or backward into the past, rarely resting in the present moment where our actual life is unfolding. The Western mind has been trained to see the present moment as merely a stepping stone to somewhere better. We're taught to defer gratification, to sacrifice present happiness for future success, to see now as inadequate and later as where the good stuff lives. This creates what Watts called the backwards law, the idea that the more you pursue something, the more it eludes you. The more you chase happiness in the future, the more you miss the contentment available right now. The more you try to escape anxiety, the more anxious you become about being anxious. Alain wisdom operates from a fundamentally different premise. Everything you're seeking already exists in this moment, not as a consolation prize, but as the main event. Let's do a little experiment together. I want you to imagine you're walking through a forest. This isn't just visualization. Really place yourself there. Feel your feet on the uneven ground, the give of earth and leaves beneath each step. Notice how your body naturally adjusts to the terrain, how your balance shifts with each stride. The air is cool and carries the scent of damp earth, growing things, the faint sweetness of decomposing leaves, feeding new life. You can hear birds calling to each other in languages you don't understand, but somehow recognize as conversation, community, the simple joy of being alive. Sunlight filters through the canopy above, creating an ever-shifting pattern of light and shadow on the forest floor. Some beams of light catch tiny particles dancing in the air, dust, pollen, the microscopic life that fills every space, reminding you that even the air is alive. You pass a stream, water moving over stones polished smooth by centuries of this dance. The sound is complex, high notes where water hits rock, low notes where it pools and eddies, the steady rhythm of flow that has continued long before you arrived and will continue long after you leave. Now notice something interesting. In this forest, your mind naturally becomes present. You're not thinking about your to-do list or rehearsing conversations or worrying about tomorrow. You're here, fully here, absorbed in the immediacy of this experience. This is your natural state, not the anxiety, not the mental chatter, not the constant planning and analyzing. This open, aware, present moment consciousness is who you actually are beneath all the conditioning. The tragedy of modern life is that we've created environments that pull us away from this natural presence. We're surrounded by devices designed to capture and fragment our attention, by social systems that keep us in constant comparison and competition, by economic structures that require us to live in the future, always working toward the next goal, the next purchase, the next achievement. But presence is always available, right here, right now, regardless of your circumstances. It's not a special state you need to earn or achieve. It's the ground of your being, temporarily obscured by mental activity, but never actually absent. Watts understood that awakening isn't about becoming someone different. It's about recognizing who you already are. The meaning of life, he said, is just to be alive. It is so plain and so obvious and so simple, and yet everybody rushes around in a great panic as if it were necessary to achieve something beyond themselves. This might be the most radical thing you'll hear today. You don't need to become anything other than what you are. You don't need to fix yourself, improve yourself, or achieve some future version of yourself to be worthy of peace and happiness. You are already whole, already complete, already exactly what this moment needs. Now, this doesn't mean you stop growing, learning, or working toward goals that matter to you, but it changes the energy with which you approach these activities. Instead of driven by the anxiety of inadequacy, you're drawn by curiosity and joy. Instead of running from what you don't want, you're moving toward what calls to you. Let me share 3 practices that can help you cultivate this awakened presence in daily life. Feel the air enter your nostrils, fill your lungs, and leave your body. That's it. One breath. But in that breath, you've returned to the present moment. You've stepped out of mental time and into real time. If you do this 10 times a day, you've created 10 moments of awakening, 10 opportunities to remember who you are beneath the story of who you think you should be. Approach your daily activities like a curious child rather than a burdened adult. When you're washing dishes, really notice the temperature of the water, the texture of soap bubbles, the rhythm of your movements. When you're walking to your car, notice how your feet feel in your shoes, how your clothes move with your body, how the air feels against your skin. This isn't about being slow or inefficient. It's about being fully present to whatever you're doing instead of mentally rehearsing the next thing. Presence makes everything more vivid, more satisfying, more alive. This is my favorite. Schedule time in your day for what Watts called purposeless activity. Sit by a window and watch clouds. Listen to music without doing anything else. Take a bath without your phone. Garden without a goal. Walk without a destination. These moments of economic uselessness are actually the most useful thing you can do for your soul. They remind you that you are not a human doing, but a human being. They reconnect you with the part of yourself that exists beyond productivity and achievement. Research from neuroscience backs this up beautifully. When you engage in present moment awareness, several remarkable things happen in your brain. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for executive function and future planning, becomes less active. The default mode network, which generates most of your anxious ruminations, quiets down. Meanwhile, areas associated with sensory processing, emotional regulation, and what neuroscientists call interoceptive awareness, your ability to sense what's happening inside your body, become more active. You literally become more embodied, more present, more alive. But here's what's truly fascinating. Studies on experienced meditators show that over time, this present moment awareness begins to permeate their entire lives. They don't need to set aside special time to be present. Presence becomes their default mode rather than anxiety. Their brains show increased gray matter in areas associated with attention and emotional regulation, and decreased activity in areas associated with stress and rumination. They've essentially rewired their neural networks to default to peace rather than panic. Now let's address something important. Living in the present doesn't mean becoming passive or irresponsible. You still plan for the future, learn from the past, work toward goals that matter to you. But you do all of this from a grounded presence rather than anxious urgency. When you're truly present, you make better decisions because you're responding to what's actually happening rather than what you're afraid might happen. You're more creative because creativity emerges from the space between thoughts, not from thinking harder. You're more loving because love is a present moment experience, not a mental concept. Watts often used the metaphor of surfing to describe this way of being. When you're surfing, you can't control the wave. You can only respond to it with skill and presence. You're not fighting the water or trying to make it behave differently. You're dancing with forces much larger than yourself, finding your balance in the midst of constant motion. This is how to live. Not trying to control life, but learning to dance with it. Not trying to eliminate uncertainty, but finding your balance within it. I want to share something personal here. There was a period in my life when anxiety felt like a constant companion. Every decision seemed loaded with the potential for catastrophe. Every social interaction was a performance I might fail. Every quiet moment was filled with the chatter of worry. But gradually, through practices like the ones I'm sharing with you, something shifted. The anxiety didn't disappear, but my relationship with it transformed. Instead of seeing it as evidence that something was wrong with me, I began to see it as evidence that I was awake to life's complexity. And in that shift, I discovered something unexpected. My sensitivity to life's uncertainties became my sensitivity to life's beauty. The same nervous system that could spike with worry could also overflow with wonder. The same awareness that could catalog potential problems could also notice the extraordinary ordinary moments that make life magical. Your anxiety and your awakeness are not separate phenomena. They're two faces of the same coin. Your exquisite sensitivity to being alive in an uncertain, beautiful, ever-changing world. The question isn't how to stop feeling so much. The question is how to feel everything. The anxiety, the joy, the uncertainty, the wonder, from a place of presence rather than reactivity. How to be fully human without being overwhelmed by your humanity. And this brings us to the most beautiful paradox of all. When you stop trying to escape your experience and start embracing it fully, when you stop trying to control life and start dancing with it, when you stop trying to be someone else and start being completely yourself, that's when transformation happens. Not because you fixed yourself, but because you've recognized that you were never broken. As we move into our final section, I want you to consider this. What if your anxiety has been preparing you for something? What if all that sensitive awareness, all that deep feeling, all that refusal to settle for superficial answers has been developing capacities within you that the world desperately needs? What if you're not anxious? You're just awake. And what if being awake is exactly what this moment in history is calling for? There's a famous story from Zen tradition about a master archer who could split arrow after arrow through the eye of a needle in complete darkness. When asked how he achieved such extraordinary skill, he replied, "I do not aim at the target, I become the target." This isn't mystical nonsense, it's pointing to something profound about how mastery works, how creativity emerges, and how anxiety transforms into flow. When the archer becomes the target, he's not anxious about missing it. He's entered a state of unified awareness, where the separation between archer, bow, arrow, and target dissolves into one seamless action. This is what Watts meant when he talked about the wisdom of insecurity. True security doesn't come from controlling outcomes or eliminating uncertainty. It comes from developing such trust in your ability to respond to whatever happens that you no longer need to know what's coming next. Your anxiety has been training you for this, though you might not have realized it. Every time you've navigated uncertainty, every time you felt overwhelmed and found a way through, every time you faced the unknown and survived, you've been developing what we might call uncertainty resilience. Think about jazz musicians improvising together. They don't know what the next phrase will be, what chord changes are coming, or how the song will evolve. But they've developed such deep listening skills, such trust in the process, such comfort with not knowing, that they can create beauty in real time. This is the paradox we're learning to live. The more comfortable you become with not knowing, the more responsive and creative you become. The more you embrace uncertainty, the more possibilities open up. The more you accept your anxiety as information rather than instruction, the more it transforms into creative energy. Let me tell you about Sarah, a composite of several people I've known who've made this transformation. Sarah was a graphic designer who spent years paralyzed by perfectionism. Every project was an opportunity for failure, every client meeting a potential catastrophe. She would lie awake, rehearsing presentations, revising work endlessly, never quite satisfied that it was good enough. But Sarah also noticed something. Her anxiety often peaked when she was on the verge of her best work. The projects that made her most nervous were the ones where she was pushing creative boundaries, taking risks, attempting something she'd never done before. One day, instead of fighting the nervous energy before a big presentation, Sarah decided to surf it. She recognized the physical sensations, rapid heartbeat, heightened alertness, increased sensitivity, as excitement rather than fear. She realized her body was preparing her to be fully present, fully engaged, fully alive to the moment. Instead of trying to calm down, she channeled that energy into her presentation. She spoke from genuine enthusiasm rather than rehearsed scripts. She allowed her nervousness to keep her humble, present, connected to her audience rather than lost in her own performance anxiety. The transformation wasn't that Sarah stopped feeling nervous, it was that she stopped interpreting nervousness as evidence that something was wrong. She began to see it as evidence that something important was happening, that she was engaged with work that mattered, taking risks that could lead to growth, showing up authentically rather than hiding behind facades. Her anxiety became her ally in creativity rather than her enemy. This is what happens when you stop trying to eliminate anxiety and start learning to dance with it. The same energy that once felt overwhelming becomes fuel for presence, creativity, and authentic engagement with life. Watts understood this transformation intimately. The only way to make sense out of change, he said, is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance. But joining the dance requires what I call paradoxical thinking, the ability to hold two seemingly contradictory truths at the same time. You care deeply about outcomes while remaining unattached to them. You plan for the future while living fully in the present. You take your work seriously while not taking yourself too seriously. This isn't logical thinking. It's what Watts called the wisdom beyond wisdom, the kind of understanding that emerges when you stop trying to figure everything out and start trusting the intelligence that flows through you. Here's a practical way to work with this. The next time you feel that familiar spike of anxiety, instead of immediately trying to make it go away, get curious about it. Ask yourself, what is this energy trying to tell me? What is it preparing me for? How can I channel this aliveness into something creative or meaningful? Maybe it's telling you to slow down and pay attention to something you've been rushing past. Maybe it's preparing you to show up more fully to an important conversation. Maybe it's channeling life force that wants to express itself through your work, your relationships, your contribution to the world. The most beautiful thing about this transformation is that it's not just personal, it's planetary. The world needs people who are awake, who feel deeply, who refuse to sleepwalk through life. Your sensitivity to life's complexity isn't a personal problem to solve, it's a gift that the world needs you to share. We're living in times that require unprecedented creativity, empathy, and wisdom. The old ways of thinking, the old systems of control and domination, the old habits of numbing and avoiding are no longer adequate to the challenges we face. What the world needs now are people who can feel the full weight of reality without being crushed by it, who can face uncertainty without being paralyzed by it, who can love deeply without being destroyed by the impermanence of everything they love. Your anxiety has been preparing you to be one of these people. So here we are, at the end of our journey together, and I want to return to where we started with fresh eyes. You're not anxious, you're awake. That restless energy you've been carrying, that sensitivity to life's uncertainties,